Our philosophy at Lansdowne about teaching and learning is that it's learner first, it's learner centred, and our practice is guided by 4 key questions that we use. So the first question is, what is it we want our students to know, or what is it they need to learn? And so that's where we look at what do we know about our students, what data have we got on them to show what progress they've been making or what gaps they might have, but also what curriculum content do they need to learn, so we marry those 2 together. Our second question is, so therefore if we've worked out what we want them to learn, how are they best going to learn that? So we really have to know our learners' learning styles. Therefore, how will we teach it? And our teaching practice is informed by formative assessment. The next question that we've got is how are we going to check that they're making progress? So we really ensure in developing our units of work that we have checking in points along the way. So if we're teaching this in history, what's a little assessment task or a checking in task to make sure that everybody has actually learnt that and embedded that information in there. And then we ask ourselves the question, so what are we going to do next if they have already learned it? You know, they're already much further down the track than we thought they would be by now, or if they haven't learned it, you know, how do we revise our unit plans? So it's very cyclical, but it always comes back to the student first. But the Australian curriculum gives us a lovely guiding content base to really inform the what will we teach aspect of our 4 questions. So when I first came to Lansdowne, our leadership structure was the principal and 2 ASTs, and we're probably led in that way of the ASTs one looking after the early childhood section of the school and one looking after the primary section of the school, and the principal running the professional learning for the whole school staff at staff meeting. But we very quickly realised that we needed to restructure to create some smaller groups who will learn together, and we've built 4 collaborative teams, and they are each led by a member of senior staff, and we have an agenda of learning, of sharing student work, of sharing student progress and development, of monitoring that and asking questions and interrogating data together in those meetings. And then we come together once every 3 weeks for a whole staff meeting, and that will have a professional learning focus for most of it around curriculum.
Well, one of the preferred ways of using the Australian curriculum is to do backward mapping. So we look at the outcomes and where we need to be and start planning the activities around that, because I think then you can think about assessment tasks that you might need to do along the way and plan the activities that are going to lead you up to the point where you can assess what the children have achieved. We've been planning a history unit, and it's mostly personal and family history. The first thing we do is that we tease out the verbs and the nouns from the achievement standards so that we can interpret what it is that is expected. I thought it was important to link the family history that the children had to Tasmanian history, and we did that through looking at the history of boats and the importance of boating in the Tasmanian history. We often sell small children short with our expectations of their thinking powers. So I've come to it from a problem-solving perspective quite often. So I will give them a little bit of knowledge, and then we will start asking them what they think might have happened.
I actually do enjoy having the Australian curriculum, but I really like that it's very specific and you can see how the children's knowledge grows over their primary schooling. My children have been explicitly taught how to log onto the computer or assist others to log onto the computer, and how to use applications on the iPad to further their learning. Skilling up the children was a process which took a while to occur. It took me about 6 weeks to get them comfortable and competent, and I deliberately structured it so that I had an aide in the classroom to be on the computer station to assist them. And now we're at a stage where certain students are able to teach other students how to use the equipment and the technology.
In context of our history and our local area and our geography, we integrated the 2 units slightly and looked at the geography aspects of the Derwent River, which is our local area. We looked at the content descriptors of both the geography and the history, and then set our planning around that, and then used the achievement standards for formative and then summative assessment. In our history unit, we looked at our local area, our local wharf, and talked about the whaling of the river and how that made Hobart prosperous. We also looked at a company that is currently operating, INCAT, which is currently operating, making international ferries, and how that lends prosperity to our community and provides jobs and gives children an idea of where they might end up working or they might want to go with their careers. Included in our history geography unit was report writing, which is part of the English curriculum, and that's how we assessed and the children produced their final piece of work about it.
As I looked at the Australian curriculum, I realised that a lot of it was very familiar. I read the rationale, which I thought was really important, that you understand why you're doing what you're doing. And then I went to the achievement standard so that I could see what my students needed to achieve by the end of the year. It set out the goals really explicitly. Then I backward plan. So as a result, all the content descriptors were achieved. So at the moment, I'm working on a unit of work that is geography. But the result, the outcome, is actually a piece of writing. So it's an opportunity to combine the research qualities and the research skills and capabilities of the geography curriculum and getting them to come up with a persuasive piece of writing which matches then everything in the literacy underwriting.
Lansdowne Crescent has had a long history of providing rich and varied learning opportunities for the children, not necessarily within the curriculum. One of those has been the Land to Sea project, which has enabled us to develop a sister school relationship, should I say, with a school in Lansdowne in Indonesia. And our latest project has been empowering some of our grade 4 students to become our techies, for want of a better title. And they have the role of going around the school and helping students and teachers across the school with any ICT issues. In this role, I've been looking at the new health and physical education curriculum, exploring the options and opportunities that might present at our school. And we've looked at the achievement standards, and of course they will guide the direction that we take.
In my class, I have a child who's profoundly deaf and autistic. So when I plan for him, I go to the curriculum and assess where he is. So for maths, it would be a prep to 1 level. I have a hard copy of the maths curriculum for that level, and I use 2 highlighters, one of achieved and one for developing. Those directives then inform me for how I plan for the next unit of work. I have to look at the language of the unit as well, because that's an area of deficit for a deaf child. So I go to the general capabilities for language and look at what key skills are needed. There needs to be that parallel working alongside for a child who's in grade 3 who wants to be doing what his peers doing. Every morning when we begin the day with our register, we do it bilingually. To create a culture of inclusion, and also the children really value the sign language, and all the children, they want to learn it. We move on to our spelling program, and our deaf teacher works across the class with all students, whether they be hearing or deaf. The general capabilities are very good in informing my planning and the progress of my student, because they begin a lot earlier. You find the right place to place your child, and then you have, a very organised and well thought out map of where you're going to next.
An important part of my role is making sure students can access the curriculum, and that's by ensuring their individual education plans are aligned with Australian curriculum and also allow them to access the curriculum on the level that's appropriate for them. For our students who have additional needs, often their access or entry point into the Australian curriculum can be at a pre-foundation level. So changes we make to the curriculum, we call adjustments and accommodations. We also call that differentiating the curriculum for our students. We find that there's 4 main ways that we differentiate the curriculum. The 4 ways are firstly content, and that's where the Australian curriculum and the general capabilities come in. So that's actually what we're teaching our students, so the concepts and skills that we want them to have. The second point is looking at the process, so looking at the way that we implement the content. The third way is looking at the product, so looking at what is actually produced at the end of a particular learning sequence. And the final way is environmental, so it may be that small groups might be the best way to show some learning to children, or it may be that they require an environment that's quieter, that's away from other children. It may be one-on-one, or it may be it's a whole class piece of learning that they're doing.
An unintended outcome of implementing the Australian curriculum, I think, has been an increase in parent confidence about what their child's going to be taught every day.
So as an experienced teacher, I like the idea of a framework, but I also like the flexibility to do what I think is important for the children and to touch on things that they're interested in.
We saw the Australian curriculum as a real opportunity. It's provided us with a real impetus for change, and that most of that change has been around the way the teachers have worked together. So we've seen a definite shift in our school in teachers working and running their own classrooms separate from the person next door to wanting to work together and collaborate. And one of the things was around that gap in knowledge. So if I'm a grade 2 teacher and I've got a strength in history, but the grade 2 teacher next door, their strength is in science, then it's been really empowering to work together and plan those units because we've filled each other's knowledge and inspired each other as well, and halved, some of those workloads too. And we've been able to look at how do we form up assessment tasks together to check in and started to see ourselves as the teachers of a whole grade of children rather than the teachers of only the children in this room. And that's been a wonderful shift. And we can really proudly say at Lansdowne now that everybody knows all the children and knows their stories, and that has really come from working together, which came from implementing the Australian curriculum.